Empress Liliʻuokalani, Hawaiian pronunciation Liliʻuokalani, Lydia Liliʻuokalani Kapaʻakea, September 2, 1838, November 11, 1917, was the only queen regnant and the last sovereign monarch of the Hawaiian kingdom, ruling from January 29, 1891, until the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom on January 17, 1893. The composer of Aloha O and numerous other works, she wrote her autobiography, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, 1898, during her imprisonment following the overthrow. Empress Liliʻuokalani was born in 1838 in Honolulu, on the island of Oʻahu. While her natural parents were Analea Keohokālole and Caesar Kapaʻakea, she was hānai, informally adopted, at birth by Abner Pākī and Laura Kōnia, and raised with their daughter Bernice Pauahi Bishop. Baptized as a Christian and educated at the royal school, she and her siblings and cousins were proclaimed eligible for the throne by King Kamehameha III. She was married to American-born John Owen Dominis, who later became the Governor of Oʻahu. The couple had no biological children but adopted several. After the accession of her brother David Kalākaua to the throne in 1874, she and her siblings were given Western-style titles of Prince and Princess. In 1877, after her younger brother Leleiohoku II's death, she was proclaimed as heir apparent to the throne. During the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria, she represented her brother as an official envoy to the United Kingdom. Empress Liliʻuokalani ascended to the throne on January 29, 1891, 9 days after her brother's death. During her reign, she attempted to draft a new constitution which would restore the power of the monarchy and the voting rights of the economically disenfranchised. Threatened by her attempts to abrogate the Bayonet Constitution, pro-American elements in Hawaii overthrew the monarchy on January 17, 1893. The overthrow was bolstered by the landing of U.S. Marines under John L. Stevens to protect American interests, which rendered the monarchy unable to protect itself. The coup d'etat established a provisional government which became the Republic of Hawaii, but the ultimate goal was the annexation of the islands to the United States, which was temporarily blocked by President Grover Cleveland. After an unsuccessful uprising to restore the monarchy, the oligarchical government placed the former empress under house arrest at the Iolani Palace. On January 24, 1895, under threat of execution of her imprisoned supporters, Empress Liliʻuokalani was forced to abdicate the Hawaiian throne, officially resigning as head of the deposed monarchy. Attempts were made to restore the monarchy and oppose annexation, but with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, the United States annexed Hawaii. Living out the remainder of her later life as a private citizen, Empress Liliʻuokalani died at her residence, Washington Place, in Honolulu in 1917. Liliʻuokalani was born Lydia Liliʻuokalani Kapaʻakea on September 2, 1838, to Analea Keohokālole and Caesar Kapaʻakea. She was born in the large grass hut of her maternal grandfather, Aikanaka, at the base of Punchbowl Crater in Honolulu, on the island of Oʻahu. According to Hawaiian custom, she was named after an event linked to her birth. At the time she was born, Kuhina Nui, regent, Elizabeth Kina'u, had developed an eye infection. She named the child using the words Liliu, smarting, Loloku, tearful, Walania, a burning pain, and Kamaka'eha, sore eyes. According to the journals of American missionary Levi Chamberlain, she was baptized on December 23. Her family were of the Ali'i class of the Hawaiian nobility and were collateral relations of the reigning house of Kamehameha, sharing common descent from the 18th century Ali'i Nui, supreme monarch, Keoe Ikekahiali Iokamoku. From her biological parents, she descended from Keohokālole and Kameiamoku, two of the 5 royal counselors of Kamehameha once during his conquest of the Hawaiian kingdom. Kameiamoku, the grandfather of both her mother and father, was depicted, along with his royal twin Kamanawa, on the Hawaiian coat of arms. Liliʻuokalani referred to her family line as the Keohokālole line after her mother's line. The third surviving child of a large family, her biological siblings included James Kaliokalani, David Kalākaua, Anna Kaiulani, Kaimina Awau, Miriam Like, and William Pitt Leleiohoku II. She and her siblings were hānai, informally adopted, to other family members. The Hawaiian custom of hānai is an informal form of adoption between extended families practiced by Hawaiian royals and commoners alike. She was given at birth to Abner Pākī and his wife Laura Kōnia and raised with their daughter Bernice Pauahi. In 1842, at the age of 4, she began her education at the Chief's Children's School, later known as the Royal School. She, along with her classmates, had been formally proclaimed by Kamehameha III as eligible for the throne of the Hawaiian kingdom. Liliʻuokalani later noted that these pupils were exclusively persons whose claims to the throne were acknowledged. She, along with her 2 older brothers James Kamehameha and David Kalākaua, as well as her 13 royal cousins, were taught in English by American missionaries Amos Starr Cook and his wife Juliette Montague Cook. The children were taught reading, spelling, penmanship, arithmetic, geometry, algebra, physics, geography, history, bookkeeping, music, and English composition by the missionary couple who had to maintain the moral and sexual development of their charges. Liliʻuokalani was placed with the youngest pupils of the class, along with Princess Victoria Kamamalu, Mary Polly Pa'aina, and John William Pitt Kinahu. In later life, Liliʻuokalani would look back unfavorably on her early education, remembering being sent hungry to bed, and the 1848 measles epidemic that claimed the life of a classmate Moses Kekaiwa and her younger sister Kaimina Awau. The boarding school run by the Cooks was discontinued around 1850, so she, along with her former classmate Victoria, was sent to the relocated day school, also called Royal School, run by Reverend Edward G. Beckwith. On May 5, 1853, she finished 3rd in her final class exams behind Victoria and Nancy Sumner. In 1865, after her marriage, she informally attended Oʻahu College, modern-day Punahou School, and received instruction under Susan Tolman Mills, who later co-founded Mills College in California. After the boarding school was discontinued in 1850, Liliʻuokalani lived with her hānai parents at Haleakala, which she referred to in later life as her childhood home. Around this time, her hānai sister Pauahi married the American Charles Reed Bishop against the wishes of their parents, but reconciled with them shortly before Pākī's death in 1855. Kōnia died 2 years afterward, and Liliʻuokalani came under the bishop's guardianship. During this period, Liliʻuokalani became a part of the young social elite under the reign of Kamehameha IV, who ascended to the throne in 1855. In 1856, Kamehameha IV announced his intent to marry Emma Rook, one of their classmates. However, according to Liliʻuokalani, certain elements of the court argued there is no other chief equal to you in birth and rank but the adopted daughter of Pākī, which infuriated the king and brought the empress to tears. Despite this upset, Liliʻuokalani was regarded as a close friend of the new empress, and she served as a maid of honor during the royal wedding alongside Princess Victoria Kamamalu and Mary Pittman. At official state occasions, she served as an attendant and lady-in-waiting in Empress Emma's retinue. Visiting British dignitaries, Lady Franklin and her niece Sophia Craycroft noted in 1861 that the Honorable Lydia Pākī was the highest unmarried woman in the kingdom. Marriage consideration had begun early on for her. American merchant Gorham D. Gilman, a house guest of the Pākīs, had courted her unsuccessfully when she was 15. Around the time of Kōnia's final illness in 1857, Liliʻuokalani was briefly engaged to William Charles Lunalilo. They shared an interest in music composition and had known each other from childhood. He had been betrothed from birth to Princess Victoria, the king's sister, but disagreements with her brothers prevented the marriage from materializing. Thus, Lunalilo proposed to Liliʻuokalani during a trip to Lahaina to be with Kōnia. A short-lived dual engagement occurred in which Liliʻuokalani was matched to Lunalilo and her brother Kalākaua to Princess Victoria. She ultimately broke off the engagement because of the urging of King Kamehameha IV and the opposition of the bishops to the union. Afterward, she became romantically involved with the American-born John Owen Dominis, a staff member for Prince Lot Kapaiwa, the future Kamehameha III, and secretary to King Kamehameha IV. Dominis was the son of Captain John Dominis of Trieste and Mary Lambert Jones of Boston. According to Liliʻuokalani's memoir, they had known each other from childhood when he watched the royal children from a school next to the Cooks. During a court excursion, Dominis escorted her home despite falling from his horse and breaking his leg. From 1860 to 1862, Liliʻuokalani and Dominis were engaged with the wedding set on her 24th birthday. This was postponed to September 16, 1862, out of respect for the death of Prince Albert Kamehameha, son of Kamehameha IV and Empress Emma. The wedding was held at Haleakala, the residence of the bishops. The ceremony was officiated by Reverend Samuel Chainery Damon in the Anglican rites. Her bridesmaids were her former classmates, Elizabeth Kekayaniau and Martha Swinton. King Kamehameha IV and other members of the royal family were honored guests. The couple moved into the Dominis' residence, Washington Place in Honolulu. Through his wife and connections with the king, Dominis would later become governor of Oʻahu and Maui. The union was reportedly an unhappy one, with much gossip about Dominis' infidelities and domestic strife between Liliʻuokalani and Dominis' mother Mary, who disapproved of the marriage of her son with a Hawaiian. They never had any children of their own, but against the wish of her husband and brother, Liliʻuokalani adopted 3 hānai children: Lydia Kaʻonohiponiponiʻokalani Aholo, the daughter of a family friend; Joseph Kaiponohea Aya, the son of a retainer; and John Aimoku Dominis, her husband's son. After her marriage, she retained her position in the court circle of Kamehameha IV, and later his brother and successor Kamehameha V. She assisted Empress Emma and King Kamehameha IV in raising funds to build the Empress's hospital. In 1864, she and Pauahi helped Princess Victoria establish the Ka'ahumanu Society, a female-led organization aimed at the relief of the elderly and the ill. At the request of Kamehameha V, she composed He Mele Lahui Hawaii in 1866 as the new Hawaiian national anthem. This was in use until replaced by her brother's composition, Hawaii Ponoi. During the 1869 visit of Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh and the Galatea, she entertained the British prince with a traditional Hawaiian luau at her Waikiki residence of Hamahamo. When Kamehameha V died in 1872 with no heir, the 1864 Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom called for the legislature to elect the next monarch. Following a non-binding referendum and subsequent unanimous vote in the legislature, Lunalilo became the first elected king of Hawaii. 36. Lunalilo died without an heir in 1874. In the election that followed, Liliʻuokalani's brother, David Kalākaua, ran against Emma, the Dowager Empress of Kamehameha IV. The choice of Kalākaua by the legislature and the subsequent announcement caused a riot at the courthouse. U.S. and British troops were landed, and some of Emma's supporters were arrested. The results of the election strained the relationship between Emma and the Kalākaua family. After his accession, Kalākaua gave royal titles and styles to his surviving siblings, his sisters, Princess Lydia Kamakaʻeha Dominis and Princess Miriam Cleghorn, as well as his brother William Pitt Leleiohoku, whom he named heir to the Hawaiian throne as Kalākaua, and Empress Kapiolani had no children of their own. Leleiohoku died without an heir in 1877. Leleiohoku's hānai, adoptive mother, Ruth Keʻelikalani, wanted to be named heir, but the king's cabinet ministers objected, as that would place Bernice Pauahi Bishop, Ruth's first cousin, next in line. This would put the Kamehamehas back in succession to the throne again, which Kalākaua did not wish. On top of that, Kalākaua's court genealogists had already cast doubt on Ruth's direct lineage, and in doing so placed doubt on Bernice's. At noon on April 10th, Liliʻuokalani became the newly designated heir apparent to the throne of Hawaii. It was at this time that Kalākaua had her name changed to Liliʻuokalani, the smarting of the royal ones, replacing her given name of Liliu and her baptismal name of Lydia. In 1878, Liliʻuokalani and Dominis sailed to California for her health. They stayed in San Francisco and Sacramento, where she visited the Crocker Art Museum. During Kalākaua's 1881 world tour, Liliʻuokalani served as regent in his absence. One of her first responsibilities was handling the smallpox epidemic of 1881, likely brought to the islands by Chinese contracted laborers. After meeting her with her brother's cabinet ministers, she closed all the ports, halted all passenger vessels out of Oʻahu, and initiated a quarantine of the affected. The measures kept the disease contained in Honolulu and Oʻahu, with only a few cases on Kauai. The disease mainly affected native Hawaiians, with the total number of cases at 789, with 289 fatalities, or a little over 36%. It was during this regency that Liliʻuokalani visited the Kalaupapa leper settlement on Molokai in September. She was to overcome to speak, and John Makini Kapina, one of her brother's ministers, had to address the people on her behalf. After the visit, in the name of her brother, Liliʻuokalani made Father Damien a Knight Commander of the Royal Order of Kalākaua for his service to her subjects. She also convinced the Governmental Board of Health to set aside land for a leprosy hospital at Kapaʻakea. She made a second visit to the settlement with Empress Kamehameha in 1884. Liliʻuokalani was active in philanthropy and the welfare of her people. In 1886, she founded a bank for women in Honolulu named Liliʻuokalani's Savings Bank and helped Isabella Chamberlain Lyman establish Kumukanawai Oka Liliʻuokalani Hue Hukuanuno, a money-lending group for women in Hilo. In the same year, she also founded the Liliʻuokalani Educational Society, an organization to interest the Hawaiian ladies in the proper training of young girls of their own race whose parents would be unable to give them advantages by which they would be prepared for the duties of life. It supported the tuition of Hawaiian girls at Kauaiahao Seminary for Girls, where her hānai daughter Lydia Aholo attended, and Kamehameha School. In April 1887, Kalākaua sent a delegation to attend the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria in London. It included his wife Empress Kamehameha, the Princess Liliʻuokalani, and her husband, as well as Court Chamberlain Colonel Curtis P. Yaukea acting as the official envoy of the King and Colonel James Harbottle Boyd acting as aide-de-camp to the Empress. The party landed in San Francisco and traveled across the United States visiting Washington, D.C., Boston, and New York City, where they boarded a ship for the United Kingdom. While in the American capital, they were received by President Grover Cleveland and his wife Frances Cleveland. In London, Kamehameha and Liliʻuokalani received an official audience with Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. Queen Victoria greeted both Hawaiian royals with affection and recalled Kalākaua's visit in 1881. They attended the special Jubilee service at Westminster Abbey and were seated with other foreign royal guests and with members of the royal household. Shortly after the Jubilee celebrations, they learned of the Bayonet Constitution that Kalākaua had been forced to sign under the threat of death. They canceled their tour of Europe and returned to Hawaii. Liliʻuokalani was approached on December 20th and 23 by James Thirst Dowsett, Jr. and William R. Castle, members of the legislature's Reform Missionary Party, proposing her ascension to the throne if her brother Kalākaua were removed from power. Historian Ralph S. Kuykendall stated that she gave a conditional, if necessary, response. However, Liliʻuokalani's account was that she firmly turned down both men. In 1889, a part-native Hawaiian officer, Robert W. Wilcox, who resided in Liliʻuokalani's Palama residence, instigated an unsuccessful rebellion to overthrow the Bayonet Constitution. Kalākaua arrived in California aboard the USS Charleston on November 25, 1890. There was uncertainty as to the purpose of the king's trip. Minister of Foreign Affairs John Adams Cummins reported that the trip was solely for the king's health and would not extend beyond California, while local newspapers and the British Commissioner James Hay Woodhouse speculated that the king might go further east to Washington, D.C. to negotiate a treaty to extend the existing exclusive U.S. access rights to Pearl Harbor or the annexation of the kingdom. The McKinley Tariff Act had crippled the Hawaiian sugar industry by removing the duties on sugar imports from other countries into the U.S., eliminating the previous Hawaiian duty-free advantage under the Reciprocity Treaty of 1875. After failing to persuade the king to stay, Liliʻuokalani wrote that he and Hawaiian ambassador to the United States, Henry A.P. Carter, planned to discuss the tariff situation in Washington. In his absence, Liliʻuokalani was left in charge as regent for the second time. In her memoir, she wrote that nothing worthy of record transpired during the closing days of 1890 and the opening weeks of 1891. Upon arriving in California, Kalākaua, whose health had been declining, stayed in a suite at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. Traveling throughout Southern California and northern Mexico, the monarch suffered a stroke in Santa Barbara and was rushed back to San Francisco. Kalākaua fell into a coma in his suite on January 18th and died 2 days later on January 20th. The official cause of death was Bright's disease with uremic blood poisoning. The news of Kalākaua's death did not reach Hawaii until January 29th, when the Charleston returned to Honolulu with the remains of the king. On January 29, 1891, in the presence of the cabinet ministers and the Supreme Court justices, Liliʻuokalani took the oath of office to uphold the Constitution and became the first and only female monarch of the Hawaiian kingdom. The first few weeks of her reign were obscured by the funeral of her brother. After the end of the period of mourning, one of her first acts was to request the formal resignation of the holdover cabinet from her brother's reign. These ministers refused and asked for a ruling by the Hawaii Supreme Court. All the justices but one ruled in favor of the Empress's decision, and the ministers resigned. Liliʻuokalani appointed Samuel Parker, Herman A. Weidman, and William A. Whiting, and reappointed Charles N. Spencer from the holdover cabinet as her new cabinet ministers. On March 9th, with the approval of the House of Nobles, as required by the Hawaiian Constitution, she named as successor her niece, Kaiulani, the only daughter of Archibald Scott Cleghorn, and her sister Princess Liliʻuokalani, who had died in 1887. From April to July, Liliʻuokalani paid the customary visits to the main Hawaiian islands, including a third visit to the leper settlement at Kalaupapa. Historian Ralph Simpson Kuykendall noted, "Everywhere she was accorded the homage traditionally paid by the Hawaiian people to their alii." Following her accession, John Owen Dominis was given the title Prince Consort and restored to the governorship of Oʻahu, which had been abolished following the Bayonet Constitution of 1887. Dominis's death on August 27, 7 months into her reign, greatly affected the new empress. Liliʻuokalani later wrote, "His death occurred at a time when his long experience in public life, his amiable qualities, and his universal popularity would have made him an advisor to me for whom no substitute could possibly be found. I have often said that it pleased the almighty ruler of nations to take him away from me at precisely the time when I felt that I most needed his counsel and companionship." Cleghorn, her sister's widower, was appointed to succeed Dominis as governor of Oʻahu. In 1892, Liliʻuokalani would also restore the positions of governor for the other 3 main islands for her friends and supporters. From May 1892 to January 1893, the legislature of the kingdom convened for an unprecedented 171 days, which later historians such as Albertine Loomis and Helena G. Allen dubbed the longest legislature. This session was dominated by political infighting between and within the 4 parties. National Reform, National Liberal and Independent, none were able to gain a majority. Debates heard on the floor of the houses concerned the popular demand for a new constitution and the passage of a lottery bill and an opium licensing bill, aimed at alleviating the economic crisis caused by the McKinley Tariff. The main issues of contention between the new monarch and the legislators were the retention of her cabinet ministers, since political division prevented Liliʻuokalani from appointing a balanced council, and the 1887 Constitution gave the legislature the power to vote for the dismissal of her cabinet. 7 resolutions of want of confidence were introduced during this session, and 4 of her self-appointed cabinets, the Weidman, McFarland, Cornwell, and Wilcox cabinets, were ousted by votes of the legislature. On January 13, 1893, after the legislature dismissed the George Norton Wilcox cabinet, which had political sympathies to the Reform Party, Liliʻuokalani appointed the new Parker cabinet consisting of Samuel Parker as Minister of Foreign Affairs, John F. Colburn as Minister of the Interior, William H. Cornwell as Minister of Finance, and Arthur P. Peterson as Attorney General. She chose these men specifically to support her plan of promulgating a new constitution while the legislature was not in session. The precipitating event leading to the 1893 overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom was the attempt by Empress Liliʻuokalani to promulgate a new constitution to regain powers for the monarchy and native Hawaiians that had been lost under the Bayonet Constitution. Her opponents, who were led by 2 Hawaiian citizens, Lauren A. Thurston and W.O. Smith, and included 6 Hawaiian citizens, 5 U.S. citizens, and 1 German citizen, were outraged by her attempt to promulgate a new constitution and moved to depose the Empress, overthrow the monarchy, and seek Hawaii's annexation to the United States. Shortly after her accession, Liliʻuokalani began to receive petitions to rewrite the Bayonet Constitution through the 2 major political parties of the time, Hoi Kalai'ena and the National Reform Party. Supported by 2/3 of the registered voters, she moved to abrogate the existing 1887 Constitution, but her cabinet withheld their support, knowing what her opponents' likely response would be. The proposed constitution, co-written by the Empress and 2 legislators, Joseph Nawahi and William Punouhu White, would have restored the power to the monarchy and voting rights to economically disenfranchised Native Hawaiians and Asians. Her ministers and closest friends were all opposed to this plan. They tried unsuccessfully to dissuade her from pursuing these initiatives, both of which came to be used against her in the brewing constitutional crisis. The USS Boston's landing force on duty at the Arlington Hotel, Honolulu. The political fallout led to citywide political rallies and meetings in Honolulu. Anti-monarchists, annexationists, and leading Reform Party politicians that included Loren A. Thurston, a grandson of American missionaries, and Kalākaua's former cabinet ministers under the Bayonet Constitution, formed the Committee of Safety in protest of the revolutionary action of the Empress and conspired to depose her. Thurston and the Committee of Safety derived their support primarily from the American and European business class residing in Hawaii. Most of the leaders of the overthrow were American and European citizens who were also kingdom subjects. They also included legislators, government officers, and a justice of the Hawaiian Supreme Court. In response, royalists and loyalists formed the Committee of Law and Order and met at the Palace Square on January 16, 1893. Nawahi, White, Robert W. Wilcox, and other pro-monarchist leaders gave speeches in support for the Empress and the government. To try to appease the instigators, the Empress and her supporters abandoned attempts to unilaterally promulgate a constitution. The same day, the Marshal of the Kingdom, Charles Burnett Wilson, was tipped off by detectives to the imminent planned coup. Wilson requested warrants to arrest the 13-member council of the Committee of Safety and put the kingdom under martial law. Because the members had strong political ties to United States Minister to Hawaii John L. Stevens, the requests were repeatedly denied by the Empress's cabinet, who feared that the arrests would escalate the situation. After a failed negotiation with Thurston, Wilson began to collect his men for the confrontation. Wilson and Captain of the Royal Household Guard Samuel Noline had rallied a force of 496 men who were kept at hand to protect the Empress. Marines from the USS Boston and 2 companies of U.S. sailors landed and took up positions at the U.S. Legation, the Consulate, and Arion Hall. The sailors and Marines did not enter the palace grounds or take over any buildings, and never fired a shot, but their presence served effectively in intimidating royalist defenders. Historian William Russ states, "The injunction to prevent fighting of any kind made it impossible for the monarchy to protect itself." The Empress was deposed on January 17th, and the provisional government established under pro-annexation leader Sanford B. Dole was officially recognized by Stevens as the de facto government. She temporarily relinquished her throne to the United States rather than the Dole-led government, in hopes that the United States would restore Hawaii's sovereignty to the rightful holder. The government under Dole began using Iolani Palace as its executive building. A delegation departed for Washington, D.C. on January 19th to ask for immediate annexation by the United States. At the request of the provisional government, Stevens proclaimed Hawaii a protectorate of the United States on February 1st, to temporarily provide a buffer against domestic upheaval and interference by foreign governments. The U.S. flag was raised over the palace, and martial law was enforced. The annexation treaty presented to the U.S. Senate contained a provision to grant Liliʻuokalani a $20,000 per annum lifetime pension and Kaiulani a lump sum payment of $150,000. The Empress protested the proposed annexation in a January 19th letter to President Benjamin Harrison. She sent Prince David Kalākaua and Paul Newman to represent her. Newman delivered a letter from the Empress to Grover Cleveland, who began his second non-consecutive term as president on March 4th. The Cleveland administration commissioned James Henderson Blount to investigate the overthrow. He interviewed those involved in the coup and wrote the Blount Report, and based on its findings, concluded that the overthrow of Liliʻuokalani was illegal, and that Stevens and American military troops had acted inappropriately in support of those who carried out the overthrow. On November 16th, Cleveland sent his minister Albert S. Willis to propose a return of the throne to Liliʻuokalani if she granted amnesty to everyone responsible. Her first response was that Hawaiian law called for property confiscation and the death penalty for treason, and that only her cabinet ministers could put aside the law in favor of amnesty. Liliʻuokalani's extreme position lost her the goodwill of the Cleveland administration. Cleveland sent the issue to the Congress, stating, "The provisional government has not assumed a republican or other constitutional form, but has remained a mere executive council or oligarchy without the consent of the people." The Empress changed her position on the issue of amnesty, and on December 18th, Willis demanded the provisional government reinstate her to the throne, but was refused. Congress responded with a U.S. Senate investigation that resulted in the Morgan Report on February 26, 1894. It found Stevens and all parties except the Empress not guilty, absolving them of responsibility for the overthrow. The provisional government formed the Republic of Hawaii on July 4th with Dole as its president, maintaining oligarchical control and a limited system of suffrage. Liliʻuokalani being escorted up the steps of the palace, where she was imprisoned after the counter-revolution of 1895. At the beginning of January 1895, Robert W. Wilcox and Samuel Noline launched a rebellion against the forces of the Republic with the aim of restoring the Empress and the monarchy. Its ultimate failure led to the arrest of many of the participants and other sympathizers of the monarchy. Liliʻuokalani was also arrested and imprisoned in an upstairs bedroom at the palace on January 16th, several days after the failed rebellion, when firearms were found at her home of Washington Place after a tip from a prisoner. During her imprisonment, she abdicated her throne in return for the release and commutation of the death sentences of her jailed supporters. 6 had been sentenced to be hanged, including Wilcox and Noline. She signed the document of abdication on January 24th. In 1898, Liliʻuokalani wrote, "For myself, I would have chosen death rather than to have signed it. But it was represented to me that by my signing this paper, all the persons who had been arrested, all my people now in trouble by reason of their love and loyalty towards me, would be immediately released." Think of my position. Sick, a lone woman in prison, scarcely knowing who was my friend, or who listened to my words only to betray me, without legal advice or friendly counsel, and the stream of blood ready to flow unless it was stayed by my pen. Empress Liliʻuokalani, Hawaii's story by Hawaii's Empress. She was tried by the Military Commission of the Republic, led by her former Attorney General Whiting in the palace throne room on February 8th. Defended at trial by another one of her former attorneys, General Paul Newman, she claimed ignorance but was sentenced to 5 years of hard labor in prison by the military tribunal and fined $5,000. The sentence was commuted on September 4th to imprisonment in the palace, attended by her lady-in-waiting Evelyn Townsend Wilson, aka Kitty, wife of Marshal Wilson. While in confinement, she composed songs such as The Empress's Prayer, Ke Aloha o Kahaku, The Grace of the Lord. She also worked with her companions to create a crazy quilt which would come to be known as the Empress's Quilt, or Imprisonment Quilt, featuring words, images, and symbols to represent the history of Hawaii and hopes for its future. On October 13, 1896, the Republic of Hawaii gave her a full pardon and restored her civil rights. "Upon receiving my full release, I felt greatly inclined to go abroad," Liliʻuokalani wrote in her memoir. From December 1896 through January 1897, she stayed in Brookline, Massachusetts, with her husband's cousins William Lee and Sarah White Lee of the Lee and Shepherd Publishing House. During this period, her longtime friend Julius A. Palmer Jr. became her secretary and stenographer, helping to write every letter, note, or publication. He was her literary support in the 1897 publication of the Kumulipo translation and helped her in compiling a book of her songs. He assisted her as she wrote her memoir, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Empress. Sarah Lee edited the book published in 1898 by Lee and Shepherd. At the end of her visit in Massachusetts, Liliʻuokalani began to divide her time between Hawaii and Washington, D.C., where she worked to seek indemnity from the United States. She attended the inauguration of U.S. President William McKinley on March 4, 1897, with a Republic of Hawaii passport personally issued to Liliʻuokalani of Hawaii by the Republic's President Sanford B. Dole. On June 16, McKinley presented the United States Senate with a new version of the Annexation Treaty, one that eliminated the monetary compensation for Liliʻuokalani and Kaiulani. Liliʻuokalani filed an official protest with Secretary of State John Sherman the next day. The protest was witnessed by her agent and private secretary Joseph Helaluhi, Wakeki Helaluhi, and Captain Julius A. Palmer Jr., reported to be her American secretary. In June 1897, President McKinley signed the Treaty for the Annexation for the Hawaiian Islands, but it failed to pass in the United States Senate after the Kūʻe petitions were submitted by a commission of native Hawaiian delegates consisting of James Keohokālole, David Kalākaua, William Auld, and John Richardson. Members of Hoi Aloha Aina collected over 21,000 signatures opposing an annexation treaty. Another 17,000 signatures were collected by members of Hoi Kalaina, but not submitted to the Senate because those signatures were also asking for restoration of the Empress. The petitions collectively were presented as evidence of the strong grassroots opposition of the Hawaiian community to annexation, and the treaty was defeated in the Senate. However, following its failure, Hawaii was annexed anyway via the Newlands Resolution, a joint resolution of Congress, in July 1898, shortly after the outbreak of the Spanish-American War. The annexation ceremony was held on August 12, 1898, at Iolani Palace, now being used as the executive building of the government. President Sanford B. Dole handed over the sovereignty and public property of the Hawaiian Islands to United States Minister Harold M. Sewell. The flag of the Republic of Hawaii was lowered and the flag of the United States was raised in its place. Liliʻuokalani and her family members and retainers boycotted the event and shuttered themselves away at Washington Place. Many Native Hawaiians and Royalists followed suit and refused to attend the ceremony. Prior to the 1848 division of land known as the Great Mahele, during the reign of Kamehameha III, all land in Hawaii was owned by the monarchy. The Great Mahele subdivided the land among the monarchy, the government, and private ownership by tenants living on the land. What was reserved for the monarchy became known as the Crown Lands of Hawaii. When Hawaii was annexed, the Crown Lands were seized by the United States government. The Empress gave George McFarland her power of attorney in 1898 as part of her legal defense team in seeking indemnity for the government's seizure of the Crown Lands. She filed a protest with the United States Senate on December 20, 1898, requesting their return and claiming the lands were seized without due process or recompense. That, the portion of the public domain heretofore known as Crown Land, is hereby declared to have been, on the 12th day of August, 1898, and prior thereto, the property of the Hawaiian government, and to be free and clear from any trust of or concerning the same, and from all claim of any nature whatsoever, upon the rents, issues, and profits thereof. It shall be subject to alienation and other uses as may be provided by law. On April 30, 1900, the U.S. Congress passed the Hawaii Organic Act establishing a government for the territory of Hawaii. The territorial government took control of the Crown Lands, which became the source of the ceded lands issue in Hawaii. The San Francisco Call reported on May 31st that McFarland had informed them the Queen had exhausted her patience with Congress and intended to file a lawsuit against the government. Former United States Minister to Hawaii, Edward M. McCook, said he believed that once President McKinley began his second term on March 1, 1901, that the government would negotiate a generous settlement with Liliʻuokalani. During a 1900 congressional deadlock, she departed for Honolulu with her Washington, D.C., physician Charles H. English, sometimes referred to as John H. English. Newspapers speculated that the Queen, having been diagnosed with cancer, was going home to die. Historian Helena G. Allen made the case that English intended to gain title to Crown Lands for himself. According to Allen, the Queen balked at his draft of a settlement letter to Senator George Frisbee Hoar that he wanted her to copy in her handwriting and sign. The doctor was terminated without cause a month after her return and sued her. The Pacific Commercial Advertiser lamented in 1903, "There is something pathetic in the appearance of Empress Liliʻuokalani as a waiting claimant before Congress." It detailed her years-long residencies in the nation's capital seeking indemnity, while legislators offered empty promises, but nothing of substance. In 1909, Liliʻuokalani brought an unsuccessful lawsuit against the United States under the Fifth Amendment, seeking the return of the Hawaiian Crown Lands. The U.S. courts invoked an 1864 Kingdom Supreme Court decision over a case involving the Dowager Empress Emma and Kamehameha III, using it against her. In this decision, the courts found that the Crown Lands were not necessarily the private possession of the monarch in the strictest sense of the term. Liliʻuokalani ceded on the lanai of Washington Place in 1917. Although Liliʻuokalani was never successful in more than a decade of legal pursuits for recompense from the United States government for seized land, in 1911 she was finally granted a lifetime pension of $1,250 a month by the Territory of Hawaii. Historian Sidney Lahua Yaukia noted that the grant never addressed the question of the legality of the seizure itself, and the figure was greatly reduced from what she had requested for recompense. In April 1917, Liliʻuokalani raised the American flag at Washington Place, in honor of 5 Hawaiian sailors who had perished in the sinking of the SS Aztec by German U-boats. Her act was interpreted by many as her symbolic support of the United States. Subsequent historians have disputed the true meaning of her act. Neil Thomas Proto argued that her gesture that day was intended to reflect the dignity with which she still held the right of her people to choose their own fate long after she was gone. By the end of that summer, the Honolulu Star-Bulletin reported that she was too frail to hold her birthday reception for the public, an annual tradition dating back to the days of the monarchy. As one of her last public appearances in September, she officially became a member of the American Red Cross. Following several months of deteriorating health that left her without the use of her lower limbs, as well as a diminished mental capacity rendering her incapable of recognizing her own house, her inner circle of friends and caregivers sat vigil for the last 2 weeks of her life, knowing the end was near. In accordance with Hawaiian tradition, the royal kahili fanned her as she lay in bed. On the morning of November 11th, Liliʻuokalani died at the age of 79 at her residence at Washington Place. Burial vault of Empress Liliʻuokalani at the Royal Mausoleum of Hawaii. The bells of St. Andrew Cathedral and Kauaiahao Church announced her death, tolling 79 times to signify her age. In keeping with Hawaiian tradition regarding deceased royalty, her body was not removed from her home until nearly midnight. Her body lay in state at Kauaiahao Church for public viewing, after which she received a state funeral in the throne room of Iolani Palace on November 18th. Composer Charles E. King led a youth choir in Aloha O as her catafalque was moved from the palace up Nuanu Avenue with 200-foot ropes pulled by 200 people for entombment with her family members in the Kalākaua crypt at the Royal Mausoleum of Mauna Ala. The song was picked up by the procession participants and the crowds of people along the route. Films were taken of the funeral procession and later stored at Ainahau, the former residence of her sister and niece. A fire on August 1, 1921, destroyed the home and all its contents, including the footage of the Empress's funeral.